And good evening. Welcome to iHeart Intellectual Radio. I am your host, Alan Campbell, for the Chronicles of Rahn. First, let me say, let's give a shout out to our hometown rapper, Chance, for the donation that he gave to Chicago Public Schools today. I'm going to touch on that just briefly. That'll be a topic for a later date. What that does is that's a young man who dug into his own pockets and gave back. And this is what has to be done amongst ourselves in our communities, in our neighborhoods, for ourselves, because nobody's going to give it to us. But once again, shout out to Chance. Good job, brother. Good job. Good job. Tonight's show, we are going to get into part 2 of communities, but we're going to dive deeper into breaking the community down to our neighborhoods. Tonight's show is called The Neighborhood Watch. There's a local story that's circulating throughout Chicago about 9 children found living in a very deplorable condition, squalor, if you want to call it. And this happened yesterday. Police were called to this location on the south side, which happens to be Inglewood, which I touched on earlier about how our communities are completely going downward. This is in Inglewood. These children were found, 9 children, ages range from 3 months to 17 years of age. There were no adults in the home when police were called. The children were taken into custody, DCFS. But the sad part about this is, how does something like this even happen? How does this happen? We could say a lot of different things on social services, bad parenting, but there's always a mitigating factor on how this happens. You have 9 children and 2 women, between the 2 of them, living in a building that has no heat, no electricity, long story short, no type of utilities whatsoever, no food, no refrigerator. And you ask yourself, how does the neighborhood allow something like this to happen? Now, mind you, the house that these children were found in, on each side of the home, there are 2 boarded up buildings. How does this, no one saw anything? You know why no one saw anything? Because it doesn't happen to them. If it's not happening to me, I'm not going to say anything. But that could have been your niece or nephews. That could be your sister. That could be your mother. These things continue to cycle throughout our community, most importantly, the Black community. We see everything else but what we really need to be paying attention to. If you ask somebody if you ask some of us, we can pretty much tell you what's going to happen on the next episode of Love and Hip Hop, Housewives, anything that has no bearing on what's going on. Zip, zero, nada. Now let's take these 9 children, and what happens is that DCF comes in, and hopefully someone steps up from the families and takes these children so they don't become products of the system or wind up in some gladiator school, or they're all separated or parceled out like mail. But the issue is, what do we need to do? We don't need any more grandstanding. We don't need people coming and say, well, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. No, stop saying we're going to, and we need to do these things. As a boy growing up in the far south side, our neighborhood was tightly knit, with everyone watching everyone. You knew everybody on the block, you knew the kids, you knew the parents, you even knew the grandparents. Everyone knew everybody. You knew Miss Johnson from up the block. You knew Miss Carol that lives on the corner. You even knew the local mechanic, the guy that always winds up having 6 or 7 cars that's sitting in his front lawn, all up on either jacks or stands or something like that. But this is the guy that everybody went to when they didn't have the money to take it to a regular mechanic. But he got the job done. This is what the neighborhood was about. It's like a blanket. everybody weaves into something and you hold together. And in the communities, in these various communities, Inglewood, Austin, Pullman, West Pullman, Roseland, Gresham, the fabric of our neighborhoods have deteriorated. It's like pouring bleach into a machine full of clothes without the water. Something is going to happen. It is going to destroy the fabric, and that's what's happened. That's what has happened. It has happened, and it continues to happen. And I use that term breakdown because the breakdown has been lack of jobs. The breakdown has been the removal of the African American man in the home. The breakdown has been lack of social skills, such as trade schools, such as trades that they have taken out of the schools. And even for those individuals who have been incarcerated, they have taken those simple trades out of the prison system. So these people come back to absolutely nothing. This is what leads to what we are talking about now, the neighborhood, and how these children and these two mothers end up in this state. Now, most people will want to try and vilify these two women, but we don't know their circumstances. We don't know what led them to this. We don't know if they have gone to social services and to try to get assistance, to try to get the help. But because the system is so backlogged, this is where we're at. So they did the best that they could. Do we agree? No, some of us may not, but we can't demonize them. We can't. Because if you look around, there's some people that are living in there's some people that are living in really good conditions and don't do half of the things that we're talking about. Look the other way. Oh, it's not my problem. I can't see it from where I am at. This is a constant problem. Constant problem. We can sit and talk around the campfire all day on, oh my goodness, this shouldn't happen. Shouldn't happen and is happening is two different things. So when we look at this, now this situation happened not 6 blocks from a police station. 6 blocks. And according to sources, is that the owner of the building states, well, he knew someone was there. He just didn't know how to get them out. Well, then that still holds you accountable. There's a level of accountability. You're accountable. If you knew this, you knew that there were no type of utilities and these people were in your property or on your property illegally, squatting, whatever you want to call it, you still had a moral obligation to do something about it. You are in a position to say, hey, let me help you. People walking by every day, at some point, someone had to see something. You have a 17-year-old. Was this child going to school? Was any of these children going to school? We don't know because this is the thing. Nobody knows, or I don't know. I don't know means I don't care enough to help you with your problem or find out what your problem is. It's really what it boils down to. So we ask ourselves, what can we do as a community, as a neighborhood to rectify these situations? How do we do this? How? First, we start by understanding what our situation is. We start by looking at what do we need to do. If you look in these communities, there are some communities that have absolutely nothing for these people to do, to go to generate any ways, any real means of living. No real way. But then on the flip side, you cross the river to go on the north side, and it flourishes. It flourishes. Do we say it's a discrepancy? Of course, there's a discrepancy. But the problem comes in is that when you don't say anything, when you don't take action and say we need to make a difference, we need to change things. When you have your elected officials who are basically the overseers, and for lack of a better word, of that area, and there's nothing going on, there's nothing being built, there's nothing being brought in. How do you, this is what leads to people living in those type of conditions. This is what leads to that. When we constantly put people in power that are not helping, we're just as bad as they are. When we see something and don't try to rectify it, we're just as guilty. We can't call law enforcement, we can't call the police to come in and help solve all of our problems because that's not their job. The police department's job is to enforce policy, enforce the laws. Keyword, law enforcement. It's not their job to come in and provide. It's not their responsibility to come in and provide jobs. It's not their responsibility to come in and educate us. It's not their responsibility. This is not a mayor problem. It's not an alderman. It's our problem that we have to solve and rectify. And we have to demand, not no longer ask, but demand what we want. Not needed, but what we want. We need jobs. We need stores that are able to employ people in the community. We need the same resources that was given to any one of any one of these wards in the city of Chicago. And the same thing applies to even suburban towns that are suffering greatly. Harvey, Fort Heights, Dalton, Robbins, Dixmoor. The same thing applies. And when we don't work together as a neighborhood, we're not going to get anything done. Not one single solitary thing done. And it doesn't, and we have to do better. Definitely. We have to work on that. We can no longer stand by and say, oh, we're waiting. We've already done that. We've been told to stand by, stand down, wait, hold on, we'll get around to it when we get around to it. There's a point to where we can no longer, where we have to say, no, we need now. We need now. Our children are in great need of things now so they can become productive people in this society instead of just numbers on someone's board to say, oh, this is what we're going to do. This is what we're going to get. In that community, there are a number of homes that are boarded up. A number of homes or buildings. The sad part about that is that this event with the 9 children could have been a whole nother story, and a whole nother, it's sad in itself, but it could have been even tragic to where they found all of them in worse conditions than what's been reported. Worse conditions. And we have to figure that out. We have to figure that out. We can't stand by no longer and watch things go by and not be proactive. We definitely cannot. And this is what we have done greatly and for too long, entirely too long. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a little break here on the Chronicles of Rahn Intellectual Radio. You can call in at 708-223-8953. That's 708-223-8953 here on Intellectual Radio, the Chronicles of Rahn. Welcome back to Chronicles of Rahn on Intellectual Radio. I'm your host, Alan Campbell. We are taking calls right now talking about the show, The Neighborhood Watch, 708-223-8953. Just a sidebar, we were discussing Chance the Rapper's gracious donation to the public schools. Now, the question is, who's going to oversee that? Where's it going, and who's going to oversee it? What school is going to get it? How do you disperse $1 million when you have a humongous debt? When you have the school board is in tremendous debt. And this is the problem with the neighborhood. This is a serious problem. And when you have someone like that making a donation to that point, this calls out all elected officials, from the mayor on down to a precinct captain. This calls everyone out, and this is letting them know we're no longer going to stand by and tolerate this. If we have to, then this is where we have to come together, and this is what you call our own money. Or in the old days, we used to call it black money. We have to do this ourselves because we're not getting it. The same situation that put these two young women in the situation, living in a building with no food, no heat, 9 children, squalid conditions. This is what happens. And all it takes is for one person to step up. And hopefully this is a domino effect for other people to say, hey, let me join in. Let me do this. Let me do this. For this young man, it's not about the money. It's not about the fame. It's about the fact that he loves his city. He loves his community. He loves his neighborhood. And he's giving back. This is something that we have to work on doing. We have to work on. It's not something that you have to learn to do. You learn to give back from the cradle. The moment you're able to walk, you learn to do that. You say yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, thank you, no, thank you, good day, good morning, good night. These are things that are taught, and all of that falls into that. All of that. These two women, at last report, were in custody, care of the Chicago Police Department. No charges have been filed, but you hope that they don't file any, or what they call a no bill, means no file, because we don't know what the situation is. We have no idea. None. Zip, zero, nada. So we have to ask ourselves, where's the family for these two women who have 9 children amongst them? Where are the family? This is the type of situation to where when something happens, everyone acts like, oh, I didn't know, didn't know. No, you knew, you just didn't care. This is a part of now, it's out there, all your businesses in the street. So now all of a sudden we want to care. All of a sudden. Then you have individuals that grandstand in front of the police station and say, oh, we didn't know. I have no idea. No. Doesn't work that way. None whatsoever. Now, the other problem is when we have property, we don't take care of it. We don't take care of it. None whatsoever. Oh, all right. And we got a call. What's your name and where are you calling from? Well, the caller, please call back. We'd like to hear it. So there's an upside and a downside when you have property. First of all, you have to consider the taxes on the property. Then when you consider the taxes, then there's the maintenance and the upkeep and the insurance. Most people are into this for the money. And there's nothing wrong with that. But when you begin to lose sight of why you're actually doing this, then that leads to bad things happening, very bad things. We can say the family had various issues. We can say the family didn't care. But at the same time, you're talking about two women, 9 kids. And that's a lot depending on the family and the home or the building that these two women's families are occupying. So when you have property, and this is something that we have to understand, that when you have property, there are things that come with it. But the real trick about property is not what's on the property. You want to own it. You want to own that little piece of land. That belongs to you. And then that makes you responsible for any and all that goes on that property. That's why when they seize property, they seize everything and they make you liable because you're responsible. If you don't know what's going on, then you're in on it. You are in on it. With this situation here, this is the breakdown of the community, of the neighborhood not looking out for their own. If you go over to Pilsen, that area, those neighborhoods are tightly knit. Everybody looks out for everyone. Everybody knows everybody. Everyone knows everyone. You go to Uptown, Lincoln Park. You go west of the city. Those communities, those neighborhoods, those are neighborhoods where people who came here and who've been there for 50, 60 years and they're not going anywhere. Then you flip down, you cross the lake. I checked that. You cross the river, go further into the city, and you see the decimation of these communities, these Black communities. And that's only due because of certain things that have come in, gentrification, even to a point where once they got rid of the projects, that created scattered housing, and that brought people out into different areas that, unfortunately, when you've been living in those type of environments and you weren't taught or you had no idea on how to take care of something, you're not going to do it. If you lived in an apartment building with public housing, whether it was Robert Taylor, Argyle Gardens, Ida B. Wells, Cabrini Green, if something broke in your apartment, you call management. Management comes out, they fix it. You have no responsibility. You have a home. Guess what? You got to cut the grass. If your water heater goes out, you have to pay for it. Oh, homeowners insurance. Homeowners insurance. Anything and everything, you are now responsible. Furnace, you're responsible now. But when you take those things from people, when you take them from one environment and put them in another environment where they have no idea on how to function, you're setting these people up to fail. And that's exactly what's happened. And this is the same thing that happened that I believe may have happened with these two women, setting them up to fail. And this is what it looks like on the media, on paper. It may look yes, it's a terrible thing, but we don't know. We have no clue on what these two women may be dealing with. Right now, they're trying to figure out, what am I going to do? How do I get my children back? How are people perceiving me? How? But we have to work together. We have to start telling people, hey, we're no longer, we have to bypass to a point where we have to bypass our elected officials who are supposed to be helping us, bypassing our certain ministers who say, well, we're here to help. Well, if you're here to help, that doesn't mean grandstanding on television. That doesn't mean holding a public office. That means you're supposed to be helping your people, assisting them in whatever facets that they may need. To say he doesn't know, and I'm referring to the landlord or the building owner, it's very difficult to say that you don't know if you own property. If you own property, it is your responsibility to make sure that it is secure, that it's the upkeep, whatever it is that you are supposed to be doing, whatever that may be. And once we get into understanding levels of responsibility, and this is the unfortunate thing that a lot of us don't experience or not taught, or we have a misguided perception of what that is. We have to understand that these things are taught to us. Responsibility. We have to do a better job of responsibility. Responsibility. We have a responsibility to not only ourselves, but to our children, to guide them. We have a responsibility in our neighborhoods. Now, we live in an age to where it's difficult to really do the things that we used to do as far as our neighborhoods are concerned, to where years ago, you could chastise a child for acting a complete fool out there in the streets. You give a kid a whack, you take him on down the block to his home, and then you tell his parents, and then guess what? He gets part two of the whooping. You can't do that. Can't do that anymore. You can't even put your hands on somebody's child. This is the fabric of the neighborhood. This is the breakdown. So now what happens is that these children feel a sense of empowerment to where you can't put your hands on me. You can't touch me. You can't say anything to me. If you say anything, I'm going to go tell my parents. And then unfortunately, the breakdown is there. Then the breakdown continues inside the home to where the parents may get into it with saying, you can't talk to my child that way. Don't ever talk to my child that way. You can't say anything to him. This is the breakdown. The fabric of the neighborhood. This is the breakdown of it. Then the other portion is that now we're inside the home and it's a single parent home, to where the mother is trying to do everything. She's trying to be the mother and the father. Or you have a two-parent home and both parents are having issues getting along. Or there's the breakdown where it's not enough, it's the finance, it's not enough money coming in. So they're already stressed out. And then at that point, I don't want to be bothered with the children. Send them away, go outside, leave me alone, or leave us alone. Let us figure this out. If we even plan on figuring this out, or we'll just leave the children there and then we'll just disappear for a few minutes. Still, it's a breakdown. It's a breakdown of monumental. It's a monumental breakdown. Monumental, and it continues to vibrate throughout the neighborhood. Then when you have that happen, then it vibrates out to the community, because now these individuals are out and about, subject to create mischief, subject to create other things that are happening, or wind up becoming a stat on the news. They wind up making the noon, the 4, the 5, the 6, and the 10 o'clock news. And then the first thing that happens is, oh my goodness, my baby. Or they didn't have to do that to my baby. Or he was turning his life around, getting his GED, and he was doing this. This is a break. This is at what point do we stop saying these things, stop making excuses, and start taking responsibility for our actions, for the things that are happening? We can no longer blame anyone else. Once you stop blaming other people, then that is the first step towards responsibility and accountability. It's the other thing, accountability. Once those two things, it's like those two are like husband and wife. They have to work together. Have to work together. And I'm sure some people that, if you're listening, that you have children, you have a neighborhood, you have people in your neighborhood that you say, I wonder what they're doing. When you used to have when the neighborhoods was the way they once were, you always would hear people say, oh, that nosy person, that nosy lady, that nosy individual. No, she wasn't so much as nosy. She was being attentive. She was watching things that you weren't even paying attention to. She was the eyes and ears of that neighborhood, that block, that little stretch of street that your kids may be running up and down. Those were the people who really made the neighborhood. Those are people. You don't have them anymore. Right now, we have the type of neighborhoods where we live in guarded conditions, and some of us in even gated communities, to where once we go in, we're locking our screen doors and rolling the shutters down and turning the blinds, and not so much the physical blinds, but our eyes also turning a blind eye to the things that we see. This is the breakdown and the fabric of a neighborhood. A real breakdown. So once we get to a point to where we begin to understand these things and say, hey, enough is enough. Enough is enough. We have to take back our neighborhoods. We have to take back our communities. We have to take these things back the same way that other communities have. We have to do that. We have someone calling in. I did. Oh. That's somebody calling in. I'm not sure. Not working here. But anyway. All right. Go ahead, caller. Oh, no, we had a call. We have a caller. So right now. Okay. Go ahead, caller. You are on the Chronicles of Rahn, Intellectual Radio. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
All right. So this is Jay. Actually, this is Jay Campbell calling out of Iowa. So I'm catching you online, but I wanted to kind of chime in for a little bit and throw some stuff out there.
All right. Go ahead, Jacob.
All right. So I want to kind of address what you've been kind of dealing with or talking about, because I think it's a little bit, we're missing a couple of pieces of the puzzle, in my opinion. And I'm all for community. I'm all for us taking ownership and accountability. But I think the major component of this is structure. It's hard for anybody to build anything without foundation. And without that foundation, which is inherently eroded, you can't build anything. That's why we have or are plagued with the diseases that are happening. And I'm saying diseases in a metaphorical way of the problems that people are manifesting in our society. If you catch what I'm saying. I think community has to start, first of all. You can't have a strong community with a bunch of dysfunctional and non-productive families. It doesn't work. It can't work. It can't sustain itself. It has to start from the building blocks of family, which starts from the building blocks of complete or emotionally well individuals. And from there, you have the essential building blocks to build a family, which now has the structure to start building and empowering other families to create a community.
That's a really good that's a really good point. Really good point. And to piggyback off that, and like you said, it has eroded. It has eroded to a point to where you say we have to completely scrap what we have and start anew. And when you have that type of erosion and breakdown, this is what you are left with. This is where you are left with. So
okay, and to that point, now that you're at the point where this is what you're left with, at what point do you put a stopgap to stop it from destroying itself? I mean, even if you run a business, if you see that your business is going into a negative position where you are not being profitable, but you're losing money, you're hemorrhaging money, do you just keep running the business and opening up your doors every day and extending credit and extending everything? Or do you say, hey, hold on, we need to freeze everything, if possible, even shut the store down so we can stabilize what's going on, figure out what we need to correct, and then do a relaunch or a reboot?
I agree. I absolutely agree.
And that is not something, and I just want to be clear that that's not something that is the police's job. It's not the mayor's job. It's not any of those elected officials' job at that point. It has to start from an individual basis of accountability and responsibility. And to piggyback into what you're talking about the 2 women with the 9 kids and blah, blah, blah. Okay, that is a whole conundrum of a hornet's nest, because in my opinion, I don't think that that's a community issue. I think that this is poor judgment in the sense of the community was not in the bed holding legs up while these folks is 10 toes to Jesus creating 9 kids. That was not a community effort. So in that regard, that's not a community situation where they need to be held totally to the bag or to the fire for that result. All right.
Thank you, Jacob. All right. Thank you, Jacob. You go ahead.
No, I'm good. That's
okay.
All I need
all right.
to say. That's all I'm saying.
All right. Thank you, Jacob, for calling in. I appreciate it. Definitely appreciate it. Thank you. That he had a lot of very good points. I will admit to that. And like he said, it's a conundrum of different things. It's a conundrum. But at the same time, we still have to look at taking some form of responsibility, looking at doing that. And this is what we do. So we're going to take a short break here at iHeart Intellectual Radio, the Chronicles of Rahn. And welcome back to the Chronicles of Rahn here on Intellectual Radio, iHeart, your station. We are talking about our neighborhoods. We had a young man call in, and he had a lot of very good points and touched on a lot of things that we actually have to really address and look at. We really, really do. To touch on what he was saying, to touch on other things as far as our neighborhoods, this also will be addressed to our schools. We have to, these are things that is part of our neighborhoods, part of it. To mold young minds, to educate them, we have to demand what everyone else is getting. We can't sit by and accept the scraps that are continuously either given to us or falling off the table. Falling off the table. Chicago public schools are in such disarray right now, financially and academically, till these children are falling by the wayside. They're falling so far behind in other categories in other countries till they're just behind. This it's an understatement to say that they are behind the eight ball. It's this is where they're at. And a lot of this is lack of resources. A lot of this is certain curriculums are being removed from the syllabus. They're being removed. Just in this was a report that just came out this morning, and I believe it's Virginia. I'm sorry, check that. New York. They are going back to handwriting as part of the academics of what they're trying to get children to go back to learn how to do penmanship. I think when we all went to school, that was a requirement. Good penmanship, and that was almost 30% of your grade. And so now they're bringing this back because now you don't have it anymore. It's not necessary that this child needs to know how to learn how to write correctly. It's imperative. Reading and writing, that's those two go hand in hand. And so now they've actually put this is a law now, to where this has to go back into the schools. Children are learning to write in cursive all over again. And what this does is that this also helps these children take a sense of pride in what they do, a sense of pride. And when you're able to instill that, give that to someone, a sense of pride, their whole aspect, their whole outlook changes. Absolutely. I know when I went to school, and that was in a galaxy far, far away, that was one of my favorite subjects of how to write penmanship, penmanship. And these are things that now they're realizing that they have to put back into the schools. They have to do this. When they removed the gym, when they removed gym or physical or gym, what we used to call it, when they took that out and replaced it with something else, kids begin to fall off. They need that little bit of exercise. They need that little bit of time away from their studies to let off some steam, to have to have a blowout, to at least just take a moment and breathe. And they need these things. And they're finding out that these things make a child actually receive the lesson a lot better. Now you go across the pond, and when I say across the pond, that's across the Atlantic. And when you go to the UK, Ireland, Germany, and other countries, these kids get gym, and their scores are higher than that of the United States. Higher. It's not that they're doing anything different with the teachers in their syllabus. It's just that they're giving these kids, they're letting them be kids. They're not inundating them with work after with work and work and work and work and work. They need a moment. And this is where we have to start. This is where we have to even demand better. Hey, this school is not operating. The school is not performing at the level that it needs to for my child or children to accelerate or to move forward in their academics, or to move forward on a simple plane, just to do that. And this is where we demand more. Parents, CPS, working together. But when you have when you have individuals that have a political agenda, they just become the pawns of that agenda. The child suffers. And then the child suffers on and on and on. Because this child may have some level of learning disability, or he's not understanding it. And then what happens is that we just move him right along. This is a problem. This is where, as a neighborhood, we all have to see this. Some things we all have. Some things we see the same way. Some things we see a little bit differently. But at some point, you see it. You see it. You can't. It's one of those things. One of those terms where they call it. You just can't unsee something. When you see it's there. It's there. It's out there. And when you look around and you see the level of intellect that some of these children are possessing, you scratching your head and saying, what is going on? Why is this happening? What are we doing? And it starts with the structure at home. We have to start there. This is where it begins. You're laying the foundation for this individual. You're laying the foundation for them to be a part of their neighborhood, where they're going out and they see something, they interact, they're working together. Everyone works together. And then when you're working together, then that translates into working with other people. That translates into working with the law enforcement community. That translates into working with your elected officials. When you're able to understand what it is that you're doing and what you need, you're able to do that. But the foundation has to be within the home. The home is the start, and that is the beginning portion. That is the start of knitting a blanket called the neighborhood, to where it spreads out to become the community, to become the city, to become one. It spreads out. And this is what we do, how we have to go about it. How. We have to fully understand, and we have to fully understand that. With that being said, this is where we part with our partnership with our elected officials, with law enforcement, to help us in keeping our neighborhoods in a livable manner. You see something, you say something. You have to work this out. You have to work this out. We can no longer pretend to be asleep and not say anything and expect someone else to come in and rectify it. We have to do that. Definitely. This is how we do things. This is how it's done. Sometimes it may be a heavy-handed approach, and sometimes it can be subtle as a feather, but it doesn't change the fact that it has to be done. We have to do that. Definitely. We go from there. So, and with that being said, this will be looking at a few other things. We'll be discussing a few other topics in my next show. And we will be really delving into some other things too. And coming up in a few weeks, I'll have a couple of guests in to interview them also about certain other things that we're dealing with right now as a community and as a people. So you have been listening to the Chronicles of Rahn on iHeart Intellectual Radio. I am your host, Alan Campbell, and I will see you, or you will see me, you will hear me next week. Next week's topic will be raising our boys to be men and raising our girls to become wives. Enjoy. We'll talk with you later.